Welcome, I'm your host Matt, and you're listening to Homicidal Tendency. Join me as we explore the darker side of the rainbow, as we dissect the grit of queer true crime and the gore of our favorite horror flicks. It's scary, it's campy, and it's always killer. Welcome back to episode 2. Real quick before we start, I want to thank you very much for tuning in last week for the launch of the podcast. It's been quite the learning curve getting this off the ground, but seeing this forward makes it all worth it. I can't wait to show you what I have in store. And since we're deep in December, I want to wish a very happy holiday season to everyone. No matter what you celebrate or who you're spending it with, I hope you find some time for yourself amid the chaos. All right, let's distract ourselves from the holiday hustle and dive into the case. I did not expect episode 2 to be a two-parter, but when I finished the basic research and the layout for the episode, it was already 40-page notes. We'll drop episode 2 on Wednesday, or part 2, I should say. But for now, let's set the mood. The room is dark, lit only by the cold, clinical blue glow of a computer monitor. You hear a mouse click. A folder opens. It's organized neatly, professionally, like tax documents or family vacation photos, but the labels are just names. Another mouse click. An image fills the screen. At first glance, it's a portrait, a man, middle-aged, perhaps South Asian descent. Sitting quietly, he's sitting there wearing a luxurious, heavy fur coat that seems too big for him. There's a thick cigar tucked away neatly in the corner of his mouth. He's perfectly still. His eyes are closed. The composition seems deliberate, careful. It takes a moment for your brain to register what's wrong with the picture. The slackness in the jaw, the unnatural pale tone of the skin beneath the studio lighting, the absolute absence of life. This isn't a portrait, it's a still life, a trophy. A digital memento of a ritual completed in a bedroom of a quiet Toronto apartment. The man is staring at the screen. He clicks again. Another folder, another name, another man. A different face, but the same fur coat, the same cigar, the same final pose. He studies them with meticulous, obsessive eye. These are his creations. Eventually, he closes the laptop. The blue glow fades. It's morning now. It's time to go to work. He stands up. He's a big man, broad and heavy-set, with a face that seems built for smiling. He walks to the closet and bypasses the landscaping gear. Today he needs a different uniform. He pulls on a pair of wide red trousers, then a matching velvet jacket, trimmed with a furry white faux fur. He buckles a wide black belt around his substantial waist and gives his genuine, bushy white beard a final fluff in the mirror. He practices the chuckle. It comes easy. It's warm. Deep sound that makes people feel instantly safe. A few hours later, he's sitting in a velvet throne in the center of the mall, surrounded by fake snow and twinkling lights. Parents gently push their hesitant toddler towards him. He beams. He jinkles with joy. He lifts a small child on his lap, the same lap hours earlier that supported the weight of a corpse being dressed for a photo shoot. He asks the child what they want for Christmas, and the parents snap a photo, another digital memory. Everyone loves the mall Santa. He's jovial. He's harmless. He hides in plain sight. That's right, kids. This is a serial killer, and he's a fucking mall Santa. Honestly, if I pitched this story to a Hollywood executive in the 1980s, they would have laughed me out of the room. It's too on the nose. It's too cliche. The killer Santa. It's a B-movie trope. It's Silent Night, Deadly Night. It's Tales from the Crypt. It's not supposed to be real life. As this is going to be a batshit ride, but let's get into it. Let's break it on down. The story of Bruce McArthur's early life is actually a perfect Steppenwise horror story. It's unnervingly normal on the surface, but when you peel it back, you see the foundation of his repression. Born October 8th, 1951 in Lindsay, Ontario, he grew up on a farm in Argyll, Ontario, a small rural community. His parents, Father Malcolm, was a Scottish Presbyterian, and his mother, Isla, was an Irish Catholic. This is the key here. They were religious, and they were strict, and they were viewed as pillars in the community. Picture it, Argyll, Ontario, in the 1950s. It isn't a bustling town, it's a hamlet, a tiny cluster of life surrounded by miles of flat, unforgiving farmland. In the winter, the snowdrifts are high enough to bury a car. In the summer, the humidity sticks to your skin. It was a place where church was the center of the universe and privacy was non-existent because everyone knows your business, or at least they think they do. At the center of this world was the McArthur farm, From the outside, it looks like a normal Rockwell painting. When you have Malcolm the father, a stoic, hard-shelled Scottish Presbyterian who believes the idle hands are the devil's workshop. You have Isla, the mother, a devout Irish Catholic who keeps the house spotless. And then you have little Bruce, the golden child, the only son, adopted into a family that demanded perfection. But inside that farmhouse, it wasn't a home, it was an institution. Because the McArthurs weren't just farmers, they were professional foster parents. Imagine the dinner table. You have Bruce, sitting there stiffly in his chair, desperate to be the good son, and surrounding him a rotating cast of troubled children from the city. The MacArthurs took in wards of the state, sometimes up to 10 kids at a time. These were children who had been labeled as delinquents, broken, or wild. They were shipped out from the chaos of Toronto into the quiet farm to be straightened out by hard work and the fear of God. For Bruce, this was a psychological minefield. He grew up watching a clear binary play out in his living room every day. There were the bad kids, the fosters, the outsiders, the ones that needed fixing. And there was him, the good son, the example. But Bruce had a secret. Even at a young age, he knew he was different. He didn't like the rough and tumble play his father demanded. He knew he was softer, more sensitive. In the rigid, hyper-masculine world of 1950s rural Canada, this just wasn't a personality trait, it was a deep. So he watched. He watched how his father looked at the broken kids with disdain. He watched how his mother scrubbed the chaos away, and he learned the most dangerous lesson of his life, performance. If he did not want to be one of the bad ones, he had to perform the role of the good son perfectly. He buried his sensitive underlayers of chores. With his father handed him a shovel and told him to toughen up, he dug up until his hands were blistered. When the church choir sang, he sang the loudest. He learned to build a wall, who he was and who the world saw. The farmhouse in Argyll was where Bruce McArthur built his first mask. It was a mask made of politeness, of religious devotion, and absolute suffocating repression. Now that we have the story of his childhood, let's touch on a few bullet points from his adulthood. Before he was a killer, he was the model of suburban success. He met his wife, Janice Campbell, in high school. They married at a young age. He was 23. He wasn't always a landscaper. He started out as a merchandising representative from Stanfield's, it's an underwear company, and then later for Eaton's. He wore a suit and tie. They moved to Oshawa, a suburb of Toronto. They had 2 kids, a son and a daughter. He was an active member of the church choir. You have to look at this through the lens of 1975 Bruce McArthur. He didn't stumble into his marriage. He was following a survival guide. In his mind, if he could just check enough boxes, the sickness inside him would go away. Get the girl, check. Get the mortgage, check. Have the son and daughter, check. Join the church choir, check. Janice wasn't just his wife, she was his proof. She was the living, breathing evidence. He could point to say to everyone, look, I'm normal. I'm just like you. He used her normalcy to dilute his own darkness, in the ultimate act of using another human being as a shield. But the pressure cooker finally explodes, but not violently yet. By the late 90s, McArthur is drowning in debt. In 1999, he officially declares bankruptcy. The provider role he was so proud of is gone. The bankruptcy forces the conversation. He leaves Janice. He leaves the house in Oshawa. He leaves the church choir. He moves to Toronto. He's nearly 50 years old, single for the first time since he was a teenager, and finally out of the closet. Imagine a man who's been holding his breath for 50 years. When he finally gasps for air, he doesn't just breathe, he hyperventilates. Bruce McArthur hit the village like a cannonball. He was making up for lost time with a ferocious hunger. He wanted men, he wanted attention, and he wanted the power. But the problem with a 50-year-old man going through puberty is that when he throws a tantrum because he can't have what he wants, he doesn't just cry, he picks up a pipe. He ended up finding his community. This is crucial to understanding why he felt so empowered. In general, the gay dating world, an overweight 50-year-old man might be invisible. But McArthur discovered the Bear subcommunity, a community that celebrates big, hairy men. He leaned into this hard. He stopped trying to look like a corporate salesman. He grew a beard, he wore a flannel, and he bought a leather jacket. Suddenly, the very things that made him feel like a failure in the straight world, his size and age, made him a catch in this specific world. He went from being a fat dad in Oshawa to a daddy in the village. The validation was intoxicating for him. Witnesses from the time describe him being everywhere. He was at the bars every weekend, the Black Eagle, Woody's, and Zippers. He was the guy that was buying rounds of drinks. He was charming, he was funny, and he was loud. This is where the Santa persona really started to form. He learned that if he was the jolliest guy in the room, the nicest guy, people would lower their guard. He weaponized his likability. MacArthur developed a sense of entitlement. He felt he was owed the experiences because he had to wait so long to start. Because he skipped the real developmental phase of dating in his 20s, when he learned about rejection and boundaries, he didn't have those emotional breaks. When he wanted someone, he became obsessed. This next part is the prequel to the murders. It was the red flag the system ignored. The victim, Mark Henderson, a male model, an escort, you would say. MacArthur hired Henderson for a few hours. They met at MacArthur's apartment. It seemed normal. MacArthur was charming. Without warning, he struck Henderson in the back of the head with a metal pipe. MacArthur didn't stop. He kept hitting him. Henderson only survived because he managed to fight back and dial 911 and hold off MacArthur until the police arrived. When the police arrived, MacArthur was acting strangely calm. He claimed, I don't know why I did it. He claimed he had blacked out. This is the moment the justice system failed the future victims. MacArthur pleaded guilty to assault with a weapon, but his lawyer painted a picture of a confused gentleman going through a midlife crisis. They brought in character references, families, friends, and even his ex-wife, Janet, who wrote letters of positive things, saying Bruce wouldn't hurt a fly. The sentence, he didn't get any jail time. He got a conditional sentence with house arrest / curfew. And he was also banned from entering the gay village, which is where all the bars and stuff were, for 2 years. He was ordered to also take anger management classes. But the ban from the village didn't stop him. It forced him to be more careful. It taught him that leaving a witness is dangerous. Mark Henderson survived to testify. MacArthur learned that this was his mistake. When he started killing in 2010, he made sure there were no survivors. Between 2003 and 2010, there was no official acts of violence. The real question is, did he stop, or did he just spend 7 years perfecting his method? Did he practice on victims that we still don't know about, or was he simply building his landscape business to create the perfect? They didn't realize they weren't rehabilitating a criminal. They were just giving a predator time to upgrade his operating system. He learned the most important lesson of his career on Halloween 2001. Dead men do not dial 911. Okay, let's talk more about the village. Centered around the intersection of Church Street and Weasley Street in downtown Toronto, it was a city within a city. It was vibrant, colorful, and historically the heart of Toronto's LGBTQ plus activism. It was famous for its massive Halloween block parties and pride celebrations. By day, it was a friendly neighborhood with communities, centers, and cafes. By night, it was the center of nightlife, cruising, and the adult entertainment district. The village was built as a sanctuary, a place where queer people could escape the judgment of the outside world. For decades, it was the only place where a man could go to hold hands, kiss, and be themselves without fear of violence. Because it was a place where people went to escape or hide, it attracted men who were living double lives, closeted men. Men from the suburbs, like MacArthur in the 90s, would commute into the area just to be gay, and then go home to be with their straight lives. It was a hub for refugees also, immigrants, and those struggling with addiction who sought community support. Bruce McArthur weaponized this safety. He didn't just target gay men, he targeted gay men of color, many of whom were immigrants, refugees, or closeted. He knew that if a man was hiding from his family because of his sexuality, his family might not report him missing. He knew if a man was hiding from the government because of a denied visa, no one's going to report him missing. He was betting that these men were already invisible to the system. The fact these men were invisible to the system, he operated on this assumption that the police wouldn't look as hard for a brown man with a drug problem as they would for a white lawyer from the suburbs. MacArthur didn't just hunt in the streets, he held court in the bars. He was a regular fixture, often buying rounds of drinks. Black Eagle, this was one of his primary haunts. It was a leather bar. It catered to more masculine and fetish crowd. As a darker, more industrial aesthetic, MacArthur fit in perfectly here with his flannel shirt and his beard. Zippers. Zippers was a popular piano bar, a dance club. It's now closed. It attracted a mixed crowd of older regulars and younger partiers. It was a place where generations mixed, making it easier for an older predator to meet younger men without raising eyebrows. Woody's, probably the most famous gay bar in Toronto, featured in the show Queer as Folk. It's the town square of the village. MacArthur's presence here solidified his reputation as a regular guy. During the years that McArthur was active, the atmosphere in the village shifted from celebration to paranoia. Defining visual of the era was telephone poles plastered with missing posters. The community knew there was a serial killer long before the police admitted it. People whispered about the boogeyman, who targeted brown men. While the community was terrified, the police closed the initial investigation, claiming there's no evidence of foul play. This created a massive rift between the village and the law enforcement, fostering that sense of nobody cares if we die. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. The village was supposed to be one place where you didn't have to look over your shoulder. It was a safe zone, but Bruce McArthur understood something terrifying. The best place to hide a wolf isn't in the woods, it's right in the middle of the sheep pen. He didn't have to drag his victims into the dark. He sat on a bar stool at the Eagle, bought them a beer, and waited for them to trust him. Now that we know a little bit about the gay village, let's talk about another key factor in his serial killing, which was his business. He formed a business called Artistic Design in 2003, shortly after his first conviction. His reputation was he was good at his job. Clients described him, he was reliable, talented, and cheerful. He was known for creating beautiful, lush arrangements. He often did extra work for free, which endeared him to his customers. His clientele, he specifically targeted wealthy, older clientele in upscale Toronto neighborhoods like Leaside, Rosedale, and Forest Hill. These were often older women or busy families who wouldn't ask too many questions and wouldn't ask why he was working late or digging in certain areas. So this comes into factor later. His quote-unquote headquarters, 53 Mallory Crescent. This is the most chilling location in the case. McArthur didn't own a large property himself. He lived in a high-rise on the 19th floor where he couldn't store shovels, soil, or large planters. So he struck a deal with a couple, Karen Fraser and Rob Smith, who lived at 53 Mallory Crescent, a beautiful home in the Leaside neighborhood. In exchange for doing the landscape for free, they allowed him to use their garage and yard to store his equipment. He had 24/7 access to their property. In reality, he turned their home into a graveyard. The couple thought he was just storing materials, but he was using their secluded backyard to dismember bodies and hide the remains. Here's a quote from Karen herself. He had wonderful clients, and he was kind and generous to them. I thought I made a deal, the best deal ever. This is a detail that makes the case unique in criminal history. Instead of burying the bodies in the ground, where they might be dug up by animals or found during construction, McArthur dismembered his victims and placed the remains inside large, commercial-grade landscaping planters. Think huge pots. He would fill the bottom with concrete or gravel and place the remains inside, cover them with soil, and then plant flowers on top. As we said, he stored these planters at 53 Mallory Crescent. When police raided the property, they found 7 of the victims inside these planters. These planters were sitting right in the garden, blooming with flowers, while the homeowners hosted barbecues and lived their lives just a few feet away. Karen Fraser later said that on hot summer days, when the flowers looked droopy, she personally watered the planters. She had been watering the graves of the men that he had killed. Let's talk about why this business was the perfect cover for him. A landscaping van is the ultimate urban camouflage. No one looks twice at a landscaper loading heavy bags or digging in the yard. It gives them a reason to be dirty, to carry heavy loads, and to be out at odd hours. He had legitimate reasons to own saws, shovels, heavy-duty garbage bag, concrete, all the tools he used for disposal. The business is seasonal. In winter, the off-season, he had months for travel, in time to stalk his victims, and to work as a fucking mall Santa. All right, let's talk about his mall Santa gig. So the location was the Agincourt Mall in Scarborough, Toronto, family-oriented mall, community mall. He was considered a tier A Santa, so an A-tier Santa. He didn't need a fake beard. He grew his own thick white beard every winter, specifically for the role. He had the natural belly, the rosy cheeks, and the blue eyes that twinkled. He was arguably the most popular Santa at the mall. Parents would specifically request his schedule. He was described as patient, gentle, incredibly convincing with shy children. This is where the horror sets in. He wasn't a reformed killer playing a Santa. He was an active killer. During the Christmas 2015 season, McArthur is working his Santa chair daily, smiling for the photos. Sometime between September and December 2015, he murdered a victim. It's highly possible that during the same weeks he was dismembering the body and hiding the remains in a planter. He was planning on putting on his red suit and holding toddlers the same day. He does return to Santa in Christmas 2016, and he had killed another victim in April of that year. The reality, he spent the holiday season knowing exactly where that body was buried, while families thanked him for making their Christmas magical. After his arrest, the people who worked alongside him as the Santa Village team were traumatized. One woman who worked as his elf, one of the people who took the photos, said he was charming and funny. They spent hours together in a small break room. He talked about his landscaping business. He talked about his kids. She noted that he seemed like the perfect grandfather. The horror is later she realized that those hands that waved at the children were the same hands he used to strangle and dismantle 8 men. But you might ask, why Santa? Why did he choose to be a Santa? For a serial killer, the role of Santa Claus offers 2 major psychological rewards. Who suspects Santa? It's the perfect deflection. It allowed him to satisfy his need for public adoration while hiding his private monstrosity. Perhaps the most brazen part is that McArthur posted photos of himself on Santa on his personal Facebook. He didn't try to hide it. He was proud of it. His profile picture was often him in the suit. When the news broke, the photos were splashed across every newspaper in Canada. The image of a serial killer in a Santa suit became the defining visual of the case, a symbol of how completely he had fooled everyone. The first 3 victims we're going to talk about took place between 2010 and 2012. They're known as the Project Houston victims. So we'll get more into that in a little bit. These first three victims are subjects of a failed police investigation, Project Houston. They were all of Middle Eastern descent or South Asian descent, and they frequently entered the village and disappeared within a 2-year window. Getting into the darker stuff, we're going to start talking about the victims. And the first victims were part of what's known as the Project Houston victims. These first 3 men were subjects of a failed police investigation, Project Houston. They were all Middle Eastern descent or South Asian descent. And they frequented the villages and disappeared within a 2-year window. So I'm going to do my best to pronounce the names correctly and respectfully. The first victim, Skanda Navatratam, he disappeared on September 6, 2010. Skanda was a refugee from Sri Lanka who had built a life in Toronto. He worked as a teaching assistant and was a well-loved regular at the Black Eagle Bar, sorry. He was known for being friendly and physically fit. Skanda and McArthur had been dating or seeing each other at least for some time. Witnesses saw them leaving the Black Eagle together on the night that he vanished. Ultimately, his remains were found in the planters at Mallory Crescent property. He was the first known victim, marking the beginning of the killing spree. His second victim was Abdul Bashir Fazi, 42. He disappeared on December 29, 2010. Bashir was an immigrant from Afghanistan. He lived a double life. He had a wife, and he had 2 daughters in the suburbs, but secretly visited the village to explore his sexuality. He also worked at a printing factory. His car was found abandoned near St. Clair Avenue and Mount Pleasant Road, near a property that McArthur worked on. It was believed that he met McArthur through a local bathhouse scene, specifically Steamworks, to be exact, or possibly a hookup act. Basically, he was closeted and his family did not know about his village visit. Because he was closeted and his family did not know about his visits to the village, his disappearance was initially treated by police as a man who simply walked away from his family life. His remains were found in the planters. The third victim, Mahid Hamid Khayan, 58, he disappeared on October 14th, 2012. Mahid was an Afghan immigrant who had a family and children, but like Fuzzy, frequented the village. He was known for being sharply dressed and super social. This was a close connection that McArthur had. He had actually employed Mahid's son as a landscaper for a period. Mahid and McArthur had an ongoing sexual relationship. And Mahid was the only victim whose remains were not found entirely in the planters. Part of his remains were found in a ravine behind Mallory Crescent property, suggesting that McArthur may have been experimenting with different disposal methods or ran out of room in the pots. So now that we've covered the first 3 victims, we're going to talk about the failed Project Houston. It was formed in November 2012. The Toronto police formed a task force to investigate the disappearance of the three men that had vanished from the gay village. The community was already panicking. Posters were everywhere. The police were finally acknowledging that the three brown men of similar age and background disappearing at the same time from the neighborhood was suspicious. There was this weird red cannibal herring situation, and it's the wildest detail of the investigation, and perfectly it's stranger than truth. Project Houston didn't initially focus on a local serial killer. Instead, they had got sidetracked by this international tip of a cannibal ring. And investigators found data linking one of the missing men, Skanda, to an online fetish forum dedicated to cannibalism. The theory was the police, they spent 18 months investigating the possibility that these men were lured into this global ring or had voluntarily been eaten. They tracked IP addresses to places like Switzerland and Germany. But the result was a dead end. The cannibal angle was just a fantasy roleplay online. While the police were looking for this international cannibal ring, the real killer, the landscaper, was burying people in the backyards in Toronto. Okay, so this next part is like where the system really failed these men and the future victims. During this Project Houston, analysts looked at the phone records and contacts of the missing men, and McArthur's name came up. He had been dating, seeing Skanda. He had employed Mahid, son. Police brought McArthur in for an interview. McArthur was calm and cooperative. He admitted that he knew the men, but claimed that they had simply drifted apart. But he was a nice, older landscaper who had no recent violent record, and they believed him. So the fault, they lacked the physical evidence, bodies to hold him, and they ruled him out as a suspect. So April 2014, after 18 months, Project Houston was quietly disbanded. Police stated they found no evidence of foul play and no evidence of a serial killer. Lame. They suspect the men might have just left town or gone into hiding due to pressures of being in the closet. When Project Houston closed in 2014, yay, Bruce McArthur was a free man. Project Houston is the definition of tunnel vision. The police were so distracted by a sensational Hollywood-style theory about international cannibal rings that they missed the mundane evil standing right in front of them. They had Bruce McArthur in the chair. They looked him in the eye. But because he didn't look like a monster, because he looked like a grandfather, they let him go. And in 3 years between the time of Project Houston and his eventual arrest, 5 more men would die. That's the cost of bias. And kids, that's where we're leaving it for part 1. I'll be dropping part 2 on Wednesday. Can't make us wait a whole week for part 2. Thank you for joining me in the dark. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with your friends and leave a 5-star review. It helps more than you know with the algorithm. And follow the show at Homicidal Tendency on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Tumblr. Yes, even Tumblr, for photos and media from today's case. We'll be back next week with a new case. Until then, remember, spill the tea, not the blood.